town. Yeah, it's a small town.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and today's guests, Janet and Carl Martin, are the owners of the Studio Shop Gallery located at 244 Primrose Road in Burlingame. The studio shop was founded in 1915, making it just under 110 years old, having changed owners only once during that time. It is the oldest retail shop in Burlingame and one of the oldest galleries in California. The Studio Shop Gallery has been a contemporary art gallery representing local to international artists specializing in painting and sculpture. Janet and Carl, welcome to the show.
Very glad to be here. Thanks
Yes.
for having us, Mark.
Janet, do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, it's wonderful to be here.
That's
Thank
what
you
I was hoping
having
for,
us.
Janet.
Yeah.
My listeners are always very excited to make sure that my guests are happy to be here. So I mentioned in the intro that the gallery has changed hands only once during the 110 years, right? Is that correct? Great.
Correct.
Janet, what year did your family acquire the gallery?
My parents bought it in 1955.
Boy, so, and then you and Carl took it over when?
1990?
Well, you were helping your parents
88
in
is-
the late 80s.
Yeah, I came back.
Well, and growing up in high school and working with them in the 70s too, but
In the 60s, and yeah.
but really working with them more in the late 80s. And then I came in full time in 1997.
Okay.
So it's 27 years ago.
Okay. Where was the original location?
So 311 Primrose, which is now Halo
Yeah.
Blow Dry Bar, was built by the Crawfords, Ralph and Dorothy Crawford. It finished in like 1930. So Ralph and Dorothy started the studio shop in 1915. They had a place down on Burlingame Avenue.
It was where the old luggage store was.
Oh,
was
way
the
down
very
there.
first location.
That was what? That's Burlingame Avenue and Lorton, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Lord, yeah. Then they bought a vacant lot on Primrose in the mid-20s. So they were doing good. They bought a vacant lot there. Ralph had been like an engineer with the city of Burlingame
Really?
before
Okay.
doing the art business. Mm-hmm. So he drew the plans for the Tudor-style building that's sitting at 311 Primrose. Then he got sick with leukemia and passed away in like 1927. And then the Depression happened. And Dorothy on her own was able to complete, by hiring carpenters and so on, complete the building in 31, the grand opening of the studio shop at 311 Primrose was in 1931, and then she ran it until the early 50s. She had a couple family members working with her, a niece and an uncle, or
Nope, just a niece.
well, there was the guy who
Carolyn
and
Nisowitz.
there was Carolyn Misowitz. So Dorothy got sick with Parkinson's, I believe, and then she passed away in the early 50s. And the niece, Carolyn Misowitz, inherited it and then sold it to Janet's parents, John and Martha Benson,
Right.
when they were like 25 and 27 years old.
And that was back in 1955?
1955.
But
So-
there was the old guy who helped your dad.
He was the framer.
Yeah, was he a relative of Dorothy's, or he was just...
He was just a framer.
He had been an employee of the studio shop with the Crawfords, and he helped John and Martha Benson get started
Okay.
in the business.
Okay. Did your parents have a love for art? I mean, they must have had some sort of love for art.
My dad was a woodshop teacher.
Where?
Junior high woodshop teacher. The last job was in Los Gatos. And they were having him teach math and PE, and he was like, I want to teach shop. So he started looking for other options for his career, and they would look in the Chronicle at the want ads, and they saw business for sale, and it was in Burlingame. They knew nothing about Burlingame. They came up, fell in love with the whole business, and borrowed $500 from my maternal grandparents and bought the business in 1955. And my dad was 27. My mom was 25 that just had a baby. They didn't have money for anything, and they just put everything into the business.
Into an art studio.
Yeah.
Did they have like a knowledge of art? And were they art lovers? I mean,
So there was a lot, there was art, and then there was also a lot of picture framing. And so my dad wanted something where, because he'd been a shop teacher, loved working with his hands, loved making things. All his life, he worked with wood. He'd get off work, come home, and he had a lathe at home. He would just continue making things in wood carvings. We still have wood carvings from, actually, we still have one at the gallery now. It's studio shop, and established 1915, and that every location we've been at, that hangs at the location. So he had a love of art, and a love of wood.
and then I guess they just kind of learned more and more on the fly, right?
So
With
in the
experience?
1960s, I'm just going to jump in. In the 1960s, he was one of the founding members of the organization that would become the Professional Picture Framer Organization of America. And it started out with a group of, I don't know if it was 10 or 12 framers from the peninsula in San Francisco, and they would meet. And they were working on improving the quality of the materials that we would use in picture framing. And there's a whole history to that. After the death of after World War II, paper makers all died off in Europe, and they used to make mats out of ragboard, and the invention of the paper mill, everything was the paper mill from the turn of the century, the last century on, and all the acids in the paper, the museums were like, whoa, our collections are starting to deteriorate. And so a knowledge was born about, okay, how are we going to preserve art, how are we going to frame art archivally and protect it. And my dad was one of the founding members of that group that became this. Well, it's an international organization. So anyway, that I feel very proud of that.
What role did your mother play in this?
My mother did a lot of the design. When people would bring in their art for framing, she did a lot of the designing. She did a lot of the bookkeeping. She did a lot of the taxes, the bookkeeping,
She did like the gift shop, because they had a gift shop thing with greeting cards and stuff too,
they
right?
sold Christmas
China.
cards every year.
So did it eventually morph into an art studio where they were selling, having exhibits and things?
So in the 30s, when Dorothy Crawford had it, she was a photographer in the style of Dorothea Lange, and she also had art, and they would have art shows. Maynard Dixon was one of the artists. I mean, people who became...
She had some pretty nice art exhibits, Dorothy Crawford did in the 30s. I think when your parents, John and Martha, had it, it was less art, but more picture framing and gift shop.
Yeah, high-end gifts.
And the art, we brought the art back into the studio shop starting in the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole sequence of events there.
And we'll get to those.
We will.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to those. So Janet, did you always have an interest in art as a youngster? I mean,
It's in my blood.
yeah.
So
Right.
I mean, I grew up around it. I worked in the business. I was around art all the time. I supported myself I made wood carvings and wood sculpture in my early to mid 20s, and then it became a more routine thing. It's like, oh, now I have a product and I've lost the art in this. It's a product. I know it sells, so I'm just making this. And Carl and I were married at the time, and we went, oh, my parents do have a really good business, you know? And so when I was 28 or 28 or so, we moved back to the area, and I started working with my parents again.
So let me just go back to a little bit of your youth, okay?
Okay.
Were you a local girl? Like you must have been if your parents were living here in Burlingame, right? You went to what, Burlingame High or Mills or Mercy or something, or what?
Born and raised at the old I was born at the old Peninsula Hospital.
Yeah.
I born and raised in Burlingame. I love this community. Carl and I were married in Washington Park.
Yeah.
I took art classes at the old rec center. I went to Coolidge Grammar School. We were across the street from Coolidge Grammar School. That is no longer a grammar school. It's anyway,
Right.
And then I went to BIS and then went to Mills.
Okay, went
Yeah.
to Mills. Carl, where did you enter this picture? I mean, did you guys know each other in high school or what?
Well, we met in 5th grade.
Really?
But yeah, so I went to Lincoln School, and there, the Coolidge School where Janet went was too small a school to have its own orchestra. So the Coolidge janitor would drive 4 kids from Coolidge up to Lincoln School for the orchestra rehearsal. So at the time, Janet was probably 5th grade and I was 6th grade. So I remember the blonde girl playing cello from Coolidge.
Did you play an instrument as
And
well
I played
then?
trombone in
Great. Okay.
orchestra. So we both then went through BIS and Mills a year apart. But we were friends. We knew each other. We knew the same people.
Yeah.
We didn't start going out until after high school, after Janet graduated.
But you were still in the Burlingame area, or had you guys moved separately, or what?
Janet was here in Burlingame. I was going to school at UC Santa Cruz.
Okay.
And then, so it was kind of a long distance. I mean, it's not that long.
But I get it. Yeah, it was a long distance relationship. You were in Santa Cruz.
And then I went to Cal, and then Janet went up to college in Eureka, Arcata, and so we had this on again, off again relationship.
Yeah.
Until she wound up moving back to the Bay Area when I was in Berkeley, 1982. And then we got married in 1985. And
was it art that brought you guys together, though? I mean, you kind of grew up as youngsters, right?
Yeah.
So you just happened to. What were you going to do, Carl, if you didn't you got married to Janet, but let's say, did you have another career in mind or what?
well, I majored in geology at Cal. I kind of had wanted to be an architect and took art classes for that interest.
Yeah.
And I loved the art classes, both studio classes and art history classes. But I wound up majoring in geology because I liked the outdoors and the mapping stuff.
You bet.
So, I worked in geology for a little while, but I wound up working in the building trades because it was more lucrative. As when we got married and we're buying a house, and it becomes important to make some money. So
Yeah.
I was in
I'll
the building
say.
trades. Janet was helping her parents in the frame shop.
Yeah.
And things were going really well at the shop. We wound up finding, so when she was helping her parents, they had this little warehouse space on San Mateo Avenue, which is the alley behind Mrs. Bubbles on California Drive.
Really?
Yeah. So is
that warehouse still there? I mean,
the warehouse is there.
Yeah.
There's an auto repair back there and
Doesn't matter.
some other.
Yeah.
So in
That once-
1995.
when we knew that I was taking over the business.
Yes.
I was like, okay, I'm helping my parents now, but if I'm taking over, Carl and I were dead set on we have to make this grow.
Right.
And the first step is changing the location.
Well, we saw an empty space on Burlingame Avenue, 1103 Burlingame Avenue, it was next door to Cheese Please. which is all Limon
Yes,
restaurant
right.
now.
Yeah.
I guess there was a for rent sign on it because I had
You're
a
the
phone
first person
number
to answer.
to call the landlord, and that doesn't really happen these days on Burlingame Avenue, I don't think. But we were like in our mid-30s and called the landlord, and we have a frame shop. We want to move on to Burlingame Avenue, and
Right.
we met her, and she let us rent the space. So that was a big push to go from like a 2,000 square foot warehouse to a 1,000 square foot retail space on Burlingame Avenue. And people in the family and others we know were like, oh, you can't do it, it won't work. But we made it work. We fit everything into, we were making frames, we were cutting frames, joining frames, doing the design. Then we're showing art there.
And that was
Is
the
that when
birth
you
of the
began to
art.
show
Yeah.
art?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, because we're on the
11:03.
avenue.
Yep. A lot of foot
Yeah.
traffic, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we
how
got-
long were you there on the
We
avenue?
were there 10 years. The building sold to a new owner who raised the rent, and so then we had to find a new space. And we knew the Dellis family, who are current landlords, and knew they had that space where we currently are at 244 Primrose, across from the Safeway area.
Yep.
And we were looking at some other spaces around, but that turned out, that was the one we picked, and that's worked out really well. So we moved there in 2005.
And that was another really good story, too, because Nick and Stephanie had been clients forever, and I knew them really well.
Yeah.
And I think Nick was always wanting us to become tenants because they have a lot of different property. And when we saw the spot where we currently are, and that was before Safeway was redone, and Wells Fargo was sort of dilapidated, and there's some homeless people sleeping over there. Carl and I looked, and we were like, yeah, this is going to be good. It's going to be good. We're going to move there. And Carl and Nick spoke, and they shook hands. And
Old school.
And
On
it
the
was,
lease.
it was old school. They
Old
shook
school.
hands, and
Isn't that
it's
great?
done. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. What was before this? Before you guys moved in there, was the shoe shop there? The shoe repair? Was that what that was?
The shoe was next door.
Oh, it was next
So
door.
I mean, currently we have two spaces. The space 248 is where the shoe store was.
Yeah.
But when we moved there, we only had the one space, 244. I think it was the paint store.
That was the paint store. And just for clarification for all the women out there, it was the cobbler. It wasn't a shoe store.
shoe repair.
Shoe
Yeah.
repair. It was shoe repair.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the shoe repair store.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We want to keep those ladies happy, right?
Well, shoe store is
No, I get
connotated
it.
in my
No,
mind.
that's-
I'm going to go buy
that's-
shoes.
Janet,
So when we
thank you
moved
for the
in there, I
clarity.
guess Chicken was next door.
Yeah.
And Sneak Preview
Was
was
there?
beyond that.
Yeah.
And then you all remember the fire that happened
Sure do.
in 2006 at Chicken.
Yep.
That was a scary
sure
time,
was.
But we were okay.
Yeah.
So we started with the one space, and the shoe repair was there for a few years. It went out, and then it became the wall
beds
beds
more.
store.
Yeah.
And I had been thinking like that might be cool to like expand into that space next door, but the wall beds moved in, and then they went out. In 2013, I was driving down to like an art show in LA and had a lot of time to think on Highway 101. And then I'm thinking like, I think we need to expand to that space next door. So while I'm driving, I called Janet and I'm like, I think we should do this. And she's like, okay. So
here
we
we
talked
go.
to our landlord about, moving in there and having a flexible lease. Like he gave us room to like back out of it if it didn't work, because it was kind of a stretch to
Right.
like
That was-
double the size of the retail space. But that was sort of that's at 2013. That was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's worked out.
I'll say it has. All right.
Yeah.
We've got some ground to cover, okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, the studio gallery has a lot of exhibits each year, right? You guys seem to always have artists coming and going every couple of 3 weeks or so, something like that.
We have like 5 shows a year, exhibits where we have artists come in and we have a bigger reception and artist conversation and talk. And then we have a lot of rotating shows as well.
Right. So we're going to talk about that for a minute, okay? Who selects these artists and the pieces to be shown? How does that happen? And I'm going to follow that up with another question is, how do you discover new artists and what do you look for in their work? So, in other words, who selects the artists and pieces to be shown and what are you looking for when you select their art?
So at this point, it's a group decision when we finally ask an artist to join the program. As the generations go on, we have a lovely daughter-in-law who is totally interested in the business. Well, because the longevity is really important to me, and our 2 sons aren't interested in it. And so Stephanie Martin will be taking over at some point, and she is an integral part of. So Stephanie
expanding her responsibilities.
So it's between myself and Stephanie are the people who will seek out the artists. We travel to a lot of different art shows.
The two of you?
The 2 of us. We go to Art Basel every year. And
wait a minute, will you go to what?
Art Basel.
What is that?
It's one of the most renowned international art shows of the year.
Does it move around or is it always in one place?
It's always, they have one in Basel, Switzerland. They have one in Hong Kong now, and it's in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we go every December to that show and we look for new artists. And we have our body of artists is California-based artists to international artists.
Yeah. Okay, so can we use the one that just sort of ended this last weekend called Selfish as an example of how this process works? Selfish was a group of new gallery artists, right? I think you had 4. Was there 4?
One was the one who's been with us, Melinda Kutsona. We've been representing her for about 20 years.
Okay, but then you had was that the sculptor?
The other three were new artists to the gallery.
All right, so how did that happen? How did you discover the other 3? And is there an interviewing process that you go through and all of that kind of thing?
We're always looking, whether it's going to art shows, going to different galleries, looking at websites. So always looking for new artists, and then there is a process, because if we have an abstract expressionist artist and we have that covered, so even if we fall in love or if an artist contacts us who does abstract expressionism, we have that covered. And so, we don't need that in the program. So you have a wide range of looks that you want. I don't know if that answers your question.
Sort of. Okay. I mean, so then do you sit and interview that particular artist, though, to find out if this is going to be a fit for your shop?
Yes. So we will talk to them, interview them. First off, we have to love the art, but we have to like the artist.
Right. There has to be a little bit of a relationship.
I don't want to have them, I don't want to represent them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you do an exhibit, such as this last one over the weekend, is there a minimum amount of pieces that they have to bring to the show? In other words, do you like to have 6 pieces from an artist, or do you want 12 pieces? How does that work? Or they just can come with 1 piece?
It becomes more fluid than that. So this last show, we had a number of pieces from Melinda, but Steven Spazik, who is a new artist with us, he's a Canadian artist. He has a gallery in New York that has a satellite gallery in Florida, and they would only give us 5 pieces.
Only give you 5.
So we are the only, on the West Coast, we're the only
that has that particular.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
great. Okay.
So there's just like, well, we want to open the door. We love his art. We want to get more of his art. And once we get it, we'll start selling it. Then he'll give us more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So once the pieces from Selfish arrived at the shop, right? Do the artists bring them in tow, or what? Are they shipped in, or how does all that work?
One of the artists, the pieces are from England. They're definitely shipped. The ones that came from Canada were definitely shipped. A lot of times they're shipped.
Yeah.
Unless it's a very local artist.
All right. So now let's say they've arrived at the shop, okay?
Yeah.
How do you decide where they're going to be displayed? I mean, who comes in? Do you and Stephanie make that decision?
Yeah, and it's a
and
curation.
Carl does the hanging? Do you do the hanging, Carl? I mean, how does that work?
I help with the hanging. We have some other staff who are really good at installing the art shows.
Yes.
I've done a lot of the installations in the past.
Yeah.
Help with painting, touching up the walls, because
Right.
every time the art
Yeah, I would
comes
imagine
down,
there's going to be some holes or something.
We go through
right?
and patch the holes
Yes.
and touch up the paint
Yeah.
and all that.
Okay. All right. So now this leads me to this question here. Selfish is now concluded.
Right.
Okay. And you don't have a new one for a while. When would the new one be coming?
The next show we will install. So we'll have, in between the shows, what we have in the gallery is, you could call it a group show, and we'll have one or two pieces of each of the artists that we represent up. So you get a really wide breadth of what we have available.
Okay.
And then the next show will be our holiday show, and we usually wait until after Thanksgiving, but this year we're going to install it mid-November, and then we will have a reception on December 7th, and it's our holiday open house with all our artists. So majority of all the local artists will show up. Clients love to come because they get to talk to the artists.
Right.
And it's just, it's joyous. It's a community event.
Okay. I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
I just want to know, so Selfish is done, right? It's completed. Do the artists come and pick everything up, or do you have to make arrangements to ship back to England? What happens now? I mean,
When we don't have artists for just a single little show like that. If we're going to take an artist on, we ask to have their work for a year.
Okay.
And then sometimes it takes a while to connect the artist with our clients. And after a year, if we haven't gotten a good response from our clients, then you give it back. But it takes longer than just a weekend to see if they're going to fit in the gallery and how they're going to work.
so somewhere in the gallery, some of that Selfish will still be on display. Is that correct, or does it all?
Each of those artists will have a piece displayed.
Great. Okay.
Well, yeah.
All right.
Can I mention,
Thank
while
you.
we're talking about
Yes.
art shows coming in and out, we just had a meeting this morning and talking about, like, the Selfish show is coming down, what goes up next before the holiday open house. And we have a couple artists from Asheville, North Carolina, which has been in the news lately because of the devastation from Hurricane Helene. So Peter Rue and Leslie Rowland are from Asheville. We have work by them. So Peter lost all his work in the floods in the artist studios there.
Gosh.
Leslie had flooding through her studio, but moved artwork upstairs, so she was able to save a bunch. But so we were talking about displaying their work, Peter's and Leslie's, in the gallery.
Yeah.
This week, as the Selfish show comes down, we'll put up their work, and so kind of show the Asheville artists until mid-November, when the kind of group show for the holiday open house will come in. So we're kind of always changing things up. There's always something new to see.
Yeah. When you do have an exhibit, are you expecting the artists to be on hand for a certain amount of time, or just one night, or can they be there several days? How does that work?
It's one night for the reception. It's easier for local artists, of course. If they're on the East Coast or something, we're not expecting the artists to come out. But we've had
Gail Garcia came
Gail
out.
Garcia came out from New York this spring for a show with her. So it's nice when the artists show up, and that's kind of the point. But it's not a requirement for that, for the evening reception for the show.
All right. Now, I'm going to get a little, I don't know how to express it, but no numbers are involved in this. When you do have somebody that you're going to exhibit, right, at the studio, do you charge them a fee? Are they charged a fee? Is it just a...
No.
There's no charge?
No. We have their artwork on consignment. So we have an agreement with them, and because we work on the sales part and they work on the
Okay.
artwork. And so it's on consignment, and if it sells, there's a commission agreement.
A commission that you guys will get
Yeah.
from that.
And
Okay,
then we
good.
mail a check to the artist, and
Yeah.
they get paid. And
All right.
the artists really like working with us because they get paid on time. They work with galleries, like they kind of lose track of a piece of art, like they don't know if they're getting paid for it. But we try to treat everyone right, and our artists appreciate that.
It all goes part of the reputation. All right, so let's say I'm going to buy a piece, right? And it says, whatever it says on the price. Is the price negotiable, or is that firm?
They're pretty firm.
They're pretty firm. Okay. But do people try to come in and say, I don't want to pay that, I'll pay this? Does
Yeah.
that ever happen?
Yeah.
And what do you say to them? Sorry, the price is firm, or would you call the artist and say, look, we've got an offer?
Sometimes we will call the artist. A lot of times we'll say the price is firm. We believe in the art. It is a wonderful piece. The artist does a really good job. A lot of our artists that we represent have wonderful resumes, so have museum representation, and we're like, these are quality artists. This isn't your street fair.
Would you ever, like a realtor that's going to sell a home, right? Would you ever tell an artist, I don't know, I think you're a little too high on this? Would you ever say that?
Actually, we say the other thing. We
You're
say
too low?
You're too low.
You can probably get more?
Yes, your art is really good quality.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and you're not charging enough for. Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever come across a situation where nothing sells and the exhibit's over now and you have to pack it up, or you leave a couple of things up? There are times when things don't sell?
So that's why we take an artist, have an agreement for a year, and if something doesn't sell after a year and we've really tried, we have said to the artist, we love your work. We don't know why it's not a fit for us.
Right.
Maybe you need to find a different gallery with a different clientele,
Okay.
but that does happen.
Okay, good. All right.
Well, and
Carl?
also, it takes time for clients to decide to purchase a piece of art, because it's not a small purchase; it's a big thing.
It's an investment.
So we've had shows where either at the gallery, or we travel for shows too, like the San Francisco Art Market, or we've been to Palm Springs for their art fair. It's building relationships with the clients, and there'll be times where you meet people and they're interested in things, and you develop a conversation about it, and eventually they decide to pull the trigger. But it's like getting the art out there for people to see it, and they decide, they think about it for time. It takes some time to think about and picture it in their home until they're like, I can't stop thinking about that piece. I need to get that piece of art.
Okay, good. Thank you for that, Carl. So what trends are you currently noticing in the art world, and do they influence your exhibitions? Anything that's kind of, I don't know much about art, so...
There's a pretty wide spectrum of art out there, and some of it is wild and crazy and not for our gallery or for our clients. I mean, these are, some things we'll see at Art Basel in Miami are like a pile of sticks on the floor for $50,000.
It's more than
But-
50,000.
Well, so there's pretty,
Yeah.
some pretty crazy stuff out there
So-
in the art world. But so we select art that we believe is for our community,
And the other thing is, when you invest in a piece of art, you don't really want it to be trendy. You want it to, in 20 years from now, you want to still love that piece of art. You might, in 20 years, have a new sofa. You might have new carpet. You might have a new floor. But hopefully you still love it. The art is long term. And for me, I say you have to visually like it, but you have to feel it in your heart and soul too.
Good answer.
Okay.
It's kind of like that 3-piece suit hanging in my closet that I got 10 years ago, and the guy said, "Don't worry, it's going to stand the test of time." I can't fit into it anymore, but it's all right.
Different thing.
So it's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
So, what challenges do you guys face as gallery owners?
The internet.
The internet.
Because with us, I want somebody to love the art, love the frame. I want them to feel it and love it. So part of our motto, or our mission is just that integrity and the excellence. And so we shoot for everything to be 110%. And somebody can be online at midnight in bed just scrolling and going, "Oh, that piece looks good." And they order it and they like it well enough, but they never really like it. They like it 60%. Mm-hmm. But the hassle of putting it back in the box and shipping it back out, they go, "Oh, we got it now."
Stuck with it.
It's stuck, yeah. And then also you cannot see all the nuances in the painting when you're looking at something online. Yeah. So the internet is a...
Yeah, so our business is based on like really experiencing art in real life, like coming into the gallery, seeing it in person. It's about, and the artists are real people who are devoting their lives and careers to making artwork. So it's like real art by real people, experiencing it in real life. There's a lot of things available digitally online but that's a whole other world. That's not our business model. We have a website where people can see the art, but the point is like you can get an idea and then see it in person, because when you hang it in your house, you're going to be living with it in person. Mm-hmm. And so I really believe in like the real experience. We're humans on this planet living a real life.
And you can speak to people that have a real passion for art when you come to the studio.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a question I have asked just about every business owner in Burlingame, because it's a question that I kind of went through myself. How did you guys survive the pandemic? Seriously, how did you do that?
That was really scary. It was really scary. There was one point where I was at home and I said to Carl, "We should just contact our clients and just let them use the art. Just let them borrow. We've got all this art here."
Did you close the shop? Was the shop closed at all?
We had to.
We had to.
And
government mandate, 3 months.
At first, the mandate, it was on a Monday in March, and I'm thinking like we're going to keep everyone busy somehow. We're going to like put them working on the website or this or that. Cleaning up the shop, it's a lot of cleaning that can happen and stuff. And then after like 2 days, I realized that was not sustainable. And because I didn't really believe in like laying people off and letting them collect unemployment or allow. I mean, it's just like, we're going to make this work.
Right.
But
you were
after a couple of days, it's like, this isn't going to happen.
No,
so it's like, it was a hard conversation, but it's like, okay, you guys, we're going to have to like, you apply for unemployment and collect your unemployment, because we can't really have people coming into the shop. So that's what happened. And then Janet and I would come in and kind of clean up for a while.
I did a lot of cleaning.
Yeah.
And then we had this idea of...
So I said, we should just let everybody just borrow the art. It's just sitting here. And Carl said, "That's a really good idea, but let's fine tune this somehow." And so he came up with, if somebody would rent the art, and it was for a nominal fee, and we donated all of the rental money to Call Primrose.
Yeah, there was a couple like Call Primrose and Hip Housing or something.
Yeah, is what we did. So it wasn't for us to make any money. It was just so those charities would get some donation. And we put that out in May when we were closed by mandate, and we had clients get in touch with us. And we went out with the masks, the gloves, the booties, and we'd go into clients' homes, and we were able to make some sales because of that. And there was one sale was like, okay,
Yeah.
rent is paid.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it lasted 2 years, right? But you were closed for what, 3 months?
Yeah.
And then you reopened. But that had to be kind of hard, right? Coming back on?
It was hard. Staffing was really difficult.
I guess so.
You experienced that.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So it was just when you came back on, it was just the two of you and Stephanie,
And
or
Stephanie,
what? Yeah.
yeah.
And you tried to make a go of it, right?
Right.
Did it take? Obviously, it took a while for things to start shaping
Yeah,
up.
it did. I mean, you started being open a few days a week with limited hours, and then gradually to where we are now, it's 6 days a week.
Yeah.
And we were open 7 days prior to the pandemic, but it's kind of like right now, this
6 days works for you.
Yeah.
Works for us. Yeah.
But I will say, by the grace of God, everybody. So once we were open again, couples were home and nobody was traveling. So the extra income they had, it was like, we have wanted a piece of art in our living room for 10 years.
So there was some silver lining.
Yes, that was for us.
Yeah.
There was a silver lining.
But it had to be, I don't know if the word is traumatic, but it had to be extremely difficult as business owners with your investment, right?
So, yeah. So in the 2008 meltdown,
Yes.
that one was really hard. And we had just opened our framing annex. That one was really hard too. And my mom walked through, she was still alive, and they'd come and visit us every day. And she said, Janet, don't worry. Dorothy Crawford made it through the Depression.
Yeah.
Just tighten your belt. You'll be okay.
I mean, when you think about that, because you mentioned the Depression earlier, Carl, when you were talking about when it was starting, right? To go through a Depression, continue for so many years here, we're talking 110 years, and then it survived the pandemic as well. It's really mind-blowing in a sense.
So, but I just remembered like my mom saying that, don't worry, you'll get through it. And that in the Depression, in the pandemic, it was like, okay, this is a really tough one.
Yeah, because nobody knew how long it was going to last.
Yeah.
And we really didn't even know what we were fighting, right? I mean, they named it the coronavirus or whatever they named it, right? What does that mean? I mean, all I know is I was in the food industry at that time, and I think there's only two people doing business, pizza parlors and grocery stores, right? Yeah. So I didn't really know the other side of it. I was so buried every day with customers or the shopping people, right? It was just...
And we all would get to go in every 5 minutes.
Yes, correct, right. So I'm just, congratulations on surviving that. That's just a great story, just the testimonial in itself. So, okay, what are you guys doing differently today that you did when John and Martha had the shop? What kind of changes have you made? More exhibits, more artwork?
More artwork, more like the picture framing tools are more automated now. We have a computerized mat cutter. We have...
and just to let our listeners know, you do a lot of framework on Peninsula Avenue, right?
Yeah.
That's called the Annex?
Yeah.
What's the address there?
350 Peninsula Avenue.
Yeah.
So that's our framing workshop.
Right.
There, and we opened that in 2008. Before that, we were renting warehouse space over by the Hyatt House on the other side of the freeway. That was a framing workshop. When I started getting like big saws and big tools for joining picture frames.
Yeah.
Back then, because when Janet's dad was making picture frames, he had the saw, or there's a foot chopper. There's a chopper that cuts wood just by pushing your foot down, and these very sharp knives come down.
Wow.
And then he would join the corners by putting a vise and nailing it with a hammer. There's a lot of new tools where there's electric motors, saw blades that cut it and join with compressed air and kind of things.
Everything was small back when my dad was doing it too.
Pictures were smaller.
They're
Now
small. Everything's
Mm-hmm.
big.
we do a lot of bigger things now.
So I'm going to go to my answer to this is we're 110 years old next year. And my internal thought always for us is forever young and staying current and staying current and staying current. And so this end of last year, beginning of this year, we remodeled the gallery again.
Yep, I remember.
And when we moved in 2005 to our current location, I wanted wood floors. So we put down Brazilian cherry. They were beautiful, beautiful floors. And we ripped them all out this year. And we have a beautiful current, that white oak. And who knew we were going to have to do it? But that orange color of the Brazilian cherry was dated. And you got to be current.
Gotta be current.
Always being current, looking forward and keeping that forward focus.
Okay, good. Okay. What advice would you guys give to artists hoping to be represented by a gallery? So when you go visit people at shows, is there any advice you would give them, or they come to you and say, "How do I get in?"
Well, one thing is for that. I think the first thing for an artist is to have a website. I mean, it's pretty easy these days. It's like, show me your work. So if it just shows a level of professionalism if they're able to have a website that and it shows that they've worked for over a period of time. They're not just starting. I started painting this year and I want to show in a gallery. It's like we look for a resume of experience and accomplishments from the artist, and then talk to them about working with the gallery. And so it's for artists who just want to focus on their artwork, because there's artists who will try to do everything, like sell their own art and work and paint it and stuff. And a lot of times an artist will come to us and I can't do that. I can't do the selling anymore. I just want
Right.
to work on my art.
Right.
And so
They've
that's
grown
where
enough that-
it works with the gallery. And, we'd have our client base who are, a lot of people in this area of Burlingame, Hillsborough, San Mateo, art collectors. So we have, a good audience who appreciates the artwork that we bring in.
Okay.
And yeah, our audience is the whole country at this point. It's
We've sold
it's-
art to New York, Australia. I mean, this is on the internet too. We're talking
France.
about being a real experience, but
yeah.
but we've received emails like, saw your artwork and we want to buy this piece and ship it to Australia. And my initial reaction is like, this has to be a scam, but it turns out to be real.
Legitimate.
And we got the
And we have
money
a
and we
client-
sent it to Ireland.
Ireland client bought the pied-à-terre or whatever in Paris, bought all the art from us and sent it over to Paris. And so it's,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, amazing. All right, so let's say I've just made an investment from the Studio Shop Gallery. What comes next? Does it come framed, or do I go to Mark's Cheap Frames and get a frame for it? What do I do? What do you guys suggest I do? I've just made a healthy investment with you guys.
So
what happens?
A lot of the art we do frame. We have beautiful frames. We have museum quality frames.
Who's going to help me pick that out? You are, Janet,
Yeah,
or
I
Stephanie?
am Stephanie
Uh-huh.
or staff. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have highly trained staff that knows. Well, we've been out to your home. We've brought the art out to your home. We are a high service. I want to bring the art to your home so you can live with it. I never push somebody into buying something. It's not the way to do it because they have to love it. And you get in your home and then you know what their design is.
Right.
And so
Okay.
then you pick the frame that's going to honor the art but also honor their home.
Okay.
So
Then you're going to send somebody out to hang
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
artwork, right?
Yeah. And if you're buying an investment piece of art, you're going to put a nice frame on it.
Yeah.
It's that there's the time where you're going to make a wonderful Thanksgiving meal, and there's the time where you're going to go to Costco and get pizza for the kids' sports team.
Right.
So there's a time for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, what advice would you give to a first-time art buyer? Like, I come into the shop, right, and I'm kind of like dazzled with everything. You're going to come up to me and say, "I can help you," and I'm going to go, "Yeah, I'd like to get some art." Where does the conversation go from there? How do you work that out?
You get to know people really well.
I mean, are you going to say to them, "Well, what kind of budget are you working with?" I mean, does that question come up at all?
That does come up, or it does come up. Is anybody else making this decision with you? Then let's get that person in also. Whether it's budget, whether it's taste, whether there's... we had a client in earlier this year where the husband and wife did not agree on anything, and we ended up placing 3 paintings in their home.
No kidding.
Yeah, and their walls have been vacant for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
So there's a discussion of what do you like, and then we have a lot of different artists that they can look at, and then you get the feeling and you see what they say.
I mean, is somebody going to come in and say, "Oh, I love pictures of the sea or the ocean,"
Yeah.
And you would kind of direct them towards that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they would look at artists that we have that do ocean pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
I have another thing to add on that, because I mean, I hear people ask, like, "I don't know anything about art, so what should I know?" And it's like, my advice is like just to look at a lot of art and develop it's like wine tasting in a way. It's like you develop a palate for what you like and think about why do you like something and why do you not like something else, and notice how you respond to this landscape over here versus this other landscape on the other side. It's just kind of developing a practice of looking at art and getting used to it. And
Through that, as we show clients different pieces and they look in their reaction and what they say, then you can show them something else that they might not have even thought they were going to respond to.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, thank you. All right, this is a chance for you guys to sort of toot your own horn a little bit. What sets the Studio Shop Gallery apart from others in the area? Why are you guys so special?
You want to go first? You want me to go?
well, I think with our experience, years of experience working in the business, I mean, we strive for really excellence in everything. One of our mottos is kind of quality, tradition, and service. And by service, I mean like personalized service, working with the customer, taking time to listen to their wants and desires and accommodating that. And we're about, driving the art out to their house and showing it to them and delivering it and hanging it. It's full service. And excellence is really our, we try to do everything, perfectly. We're very involved in the Professional Picture Frame Association, which Janet talked about earlier, her dad helping start in the 60s. But they have conventions and classes every year that we participate in. I was president of the Northern California PPFA Association for like
Long
5
time.
years until the pandemic, and that kind of closed down pub meetings and all that sort of thing. But we're always trying to improve our product, improve our staff. We believe in continuing education, personal service with the client, and just
Okay.
take
Janet,
everything.
you're chomping at
So
the bit.
I'm born and raised in Burlingame. This is my community. It's Carl's community. He moved here when he was 4, but it's our community. It's our children's community. Integrity. Mine is, I live here. I'm going to see you at the grocery store. I'm going to see you while I'm sitting at Stella having dinner. I'm going to, and so integrity is really, really important to me in our business, in my life, in our philanthropic life. But that, where you go to sleep at night and you're good. So integrity is really important to me, born and raised here. We just had a client in yesterday with framing, and it's a multi-generational client. And we're reframing antique samplers, the needlepoint stuff that was made in the 1800s, 5 pieces. And the stickers on the back and the paper on the back were from the 1940s and 1950s.
Of the studio shop.
From the studio shop. Yeah. So, and when we bought our house in 1997, 5 people were making offers, and our real estate agent gave the presentation, this cute young couple with 2 little kids, and that we had taken over my parents' business. He asked what was the business name, and she said studio shop. And he said, oh, tell them it's theirs. They just need to offer $15,000 more. So we had to go from $399 to $415.
Well, that was because when he was cleaning out the house of his mom's stuff, there was pictures with the studio shop sticker
Isn't that
on
great?
on
it was recognition then.
Yeah, so that was so integrity.
Yep.
That's
what it's about.
yeah.
Well said, guys. I guess somebody that's been around for 110 years is doing something pretty right, huh? Absolutely.
Right.
All right, before we wrap this up, and I think you mentioned it earlier, but let's do it again for our listeners out there. What artists will be featured next, and what's going to be the dates of that exhibit?
December 7th will be our annual holiday open house from
How long does that last?
2 o'clock till 5 o'clock. And
Is it one day only?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll have lots of artists there. It is a group show. So we'll have every artist will curate it beautifully.
Yeah.
And art is an amazing holiday gift.
Great pitch. Carl, do you have anything to piggyback on that? Or?
Well, you asked what artists would be there. We could list a bunch of names, but most of our
But there's going to be
artists
several.
will be there.
Yeah.
Several.
The art
Yeah.
will be on exhibit for a couple weeks before that, from mid-November until probably the end of December.
Yeah.
December 7th is a great time to come and meet artists, have some food and wine,
Right.
beverages.
Yeah.
My brass quintet is going to play Christmas carols.
So you're still
there.
playing?
Yeah.
Terrific. Congratulations. That's awesome. Great. So
That's
you guys,
all.
you're going to play there that evening?
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Janet and Carl, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to thank Janet and Carl Martin, the owners of the Studio Shop Gallery, for being my guests today on Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. Thanks to the great Ray Tyler for video. Original music by Bray. You can hear more of Bray at braymusic.com. This podcast was recorded on Wednesday, October 9th, 2024 at the Burlingame Public Library. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this program, and no part can be copied and replayed without the written consent of the Burlingame Historical Society. And finally, if you like what we've been doing, please give us a like, make a comment, and subscribe. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.